Chosen one. Stop for a moment. Heaven has interrupted your scroll, not to entertain you, but to awaken you. You did not land here by accident. Something beyond algorithms is reaching for you right now. There's a message burning through the static, and it carries both warning and mercy. You've felt the unease lately, haven't you? The strange silence between moments, the sudden stirring in your chest, like the air thickens before a storm. That's not anxiety. That's the whisper of God brushing against your spirit, calling your attention before you wander too far. There's a reason your heart has been restless. Heaven speaks in restlessness when comfort becomes dangerous. When your purpose begins to sleep beneath routine, God shakes the ground beneath your feet to remind you, you are not ordinary. You are marked. Let me tell you about Elior. He was one of the quiet ones, faithful, disciplined, yet dulled by delay. For years, he waited for God to move, unaware that God was waiting for him to listen. Every morning, he repeated the same prayer, Lord, give me a sign. But heaven had already spoken. Elior just wasn't still enough to hear. One night, in a dream, he found himself standing before two roads, one shining with light, the other cloaked in mist. A voice said, choose before the mist becomes your comfort. He woke trembling. That night marked his turning point. He realized warning is not punishment. It's permission to change, to return, to rise again. You are standing at that same crossroad now, and heaven is saying, give careful thought to your ways. As declared in the book of Haggai, chapter 1, verse 7. This is what the Lord says, give careful thought to all your ways. Those words are not ancient relics. They are a present command. Think, how long have you postponed obedience because you felt unready? How many times have you said, I'll pray tomorrow, while tomorrow quietly turned into another year? The Lord is not asking for your perfection. He is asking for your attention. Picture this, a lighthouse standing at the edge of violent waves. The keeper must keep its flame burning through the storm. If he falls asleep for even a moment, ships crash in the dark. You are that keeper. Chosen one, your light, your prayer, your faith. They guard more lives than you realize. That's why the enemy has been trying so hard to distract you. Distraction is not harmless. It is warfare dressed as comfort. Every scroll too long, every delay in prayer, every compromise that feels small, these are the silent thieves of destiny. Heaven is warning you, because time is moving differently now. The shaking around you is not chaos, it is alignment. Maybe you've been asking, God, why is everything falling apart? But perhaps it's not falling apart, it's falling into order. When God begins to rebuild, He first clears what no longer belongs. Don't mistake divine reordering for destruction. Some losses are instructions in disguise. Even now, the Spirit is saying, return before your peace runs dry. You have felt the weight of conviction because mercy is still active over you. Conviction means heaven hasn't stopped speaking. Silence comes only when grace has been refused too long. That's not your story. Not yet. You're still being pursued. Take this moment seriously. Don't let the tone of warning make you afraid. Let it make you awake. There is still time to shift. Still time to align. Still time to rise. God is not asking you to be flawless. He's asking you to be faithful. So right now, wherever you are, pause, breathe, Whisper, "I hear you, Lord." Then take one simple step of obedience. Share this message if it spoke to you, not as a habit, but as a seed of faith for someone else. Like this, so it continues to reach those who are fading into noise. Subscribe if you sense this word is your confirmation, because the journey is only beginning. Heaven's warning is not a threat, it's an invitation. The question is, will you treat it lightly or will you move? Comment 777 below as a prophetic act, the number of divine completion. The sign that you hear and choose to respond. When you comment, you're not typing numbers, you're answering a summons. Heaven sees every act of faith, no matter how small. This moment could be your turning point toward destiny. Let your comment become your covenant. The simple act of obedience unlocks doors unseen, aligning you with divine timing. Step forward. Heaven is already watching. You've heard the whisper before, haven't you? That quiet voice that finds you in the stillness between thoughts, in the half-lit hours before dawn, when the world feels both heavy and holy. It isn't the sound of your mind wandering, it's heaven drawing near, speaking before the storm arrives. This is how God often works. He warns before he moves. He stirs before he shifts. The gentle unease you feel is not confusion, it's preparation. When the Spirit begins to unsettle your peace, it's not punishment, it's positioning. The ancient prophets knew this rhythm. Elijah felt it as a wind that shattered mountains. But he found God not in the wind, nor in the fire, but in the whisper that followed. That same whisper moves through your life right now, asking you to notice the signs before they turn into consequences. Sometimes the warning doesn't come as thunder or tragedy, it comes as small disconnections. Friends drift, doors close. What once felt easy now feels heavy. It's heaven's subtle language saying, you're outgrowing this space. Every discomfort is a message coded in grace. Elior once felt that same weight after his turning point. Weeks after his dream, he found that the places that once fed him spiritually now felt dry. The people he once leaned on no longer understood him. He wondered if something was wrong. But in truth, it was the whisper again, God saying, "Move. The manna from this place has expired." Lef, you've been in that space before, the middle ground between where you were and where you're going. It's a lonely place. Familiar comforts fade. But the new season hasn't yet revealed its form. Heaven calls this the tension of transition. It's where faith grows legs. Think of a seed buried in soil. To the seed, the darkness feels like death. But to heaven, it's transformation. What you call isolation, heaven calls incubation. You may not see the surface breaking yet, but underground, life is moving. Roots are forming before branches can appear. This is the season of silent warning. Not a shout from the sky, but a tug in your chest that says, don't ignore this moment. When your routines begin to feel too small, when conversations no longer feed your spirit, that's heaven's cue. It's time to move into deeper water. The whisper before the storm is not meant to terrify you, it's meant to save you. God always speaks before a shaking, so that when the ground moves, your heart won't. The danger is not the storm itself, it's missing the preparation that comes before it. The Word of God records such a moment in the days of Noah. The people saw no rain, so they mocked the warning. But the flood didn't begin with thunder, it began with obedience. One man listened. One man built. One man moved before he saw. You are being called to that same obedience. Move before you see. Build before it makes sense. Trust before it's obvious. We often expect warnings to come wrapped in drama. But the Spirit rarely shouts. He nudges. He repeats. And if we keep ignoring, the volume increases until it breaks something we thought we needed. That's mercy too. He'd rather break your plan than lose your soul. The story of Elia mirrors yours. After weeks of discomfort, he stopped praying for new blessings and started asking for new hearing. That night, peace returned, not because his situation changed, but because he finally understood the silence. Silence was God's language of transition. So if you feel the stillness pressing on you, don't panic. Don't rush. Don't numb it with distraction. Sit with it. Ask what the Spirit is trying to reveal. Every warning, when received in humility, becomes an invitation to intimacy. The prophet Hosea spoke in the book of Hosea, chapter 10, verse 12. Sow righteousness for yourselves. Reap unfailing love in return. Break your unplowed ground. It is time to seek the Lord. Breaking the ground hurts. It always does. But what comes after is harvest. You cannot carry yesterday's soil into tomorrow's calling. The whisper before the storm is heaven's kindness. It gives you time to prepare, to clear the clutter, to anchor your spirit before the rain begins. Listen now, while the wind is still gentle. There is safety in early obedience. Elior learned that truth the night he decided to step into the unknown. He didn't wait for lightning, he moved with the whisper. And when the storm came, he was already standing where peace lived. So, chosen one, listen closely. The voice you hear isn't your imagination. It's not your fear. It's the same voice that calmed seas, guided prophets, and raised the weary back to life. It speaks softly now, because grace is still holding the door open. Don't wait for the thunder to understand what the whisper already revealed. You may not realize it, but your mind has become a battlefield. The war isn't fought with weapons or visible enemies, it's fought in distractions, in fatigue, in the pull of 1,000 meaningless scrolls that keep your spirit numb. The war for your attention is the most dangerous one, because whoever owns your attention owns your destiny. You've been feeling it lately, the constant noise, the endless notifications, the restlessness that keeps you from being still long enough to hear God's voice. It's not random. Darkness knows it cannot destroy you. So it tries to divide you, fragment your focus, until you no longer remember what peace feels like. Elior learned this lesson too. After he obeyed the whisper, he began to face something new, distraction that looked harmless. People praised his faith. Opportunities came. Doors opened, but each one demanded more of his time, more of his heart. Slowly, without realizing it, his prayer time shrank. He was still doing good things, but heaven was no longer first. That's how the enemy moves. He doesn't always use sin. Sometimes he uses speed. He knows that if you are constantly busy, you won't have time to listen. And if you can't listen, you can't obey. The war for your attention is really the war for your alignment. The world calls it multitasking. Heaven calls it divided loyalty. You felt it, haven't you? That ache when you scroll past what you know you should meditate on. That subtle guilt when you tell yourself, "I'll pray later," but later never comes. The Apostle Paul once warned about this exact struggle. The Apostle reminds us in his first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 7, verse 35, "I am saying this for your own good, not to restrict you, but that you may live in a right way, in undivided devotion to the Lord." Undivided devotion, that's the phrase the world has forgotten. Your phone pings, your schedule fills, your peace leaks out through 1,000 open windows of distraction, but heaven is whispering, "Close the windows, guard your gaze." End of. You see, attention is worship. Whatever you give it to becomes your altar. Some altars look like screens, others like ambition, others like relationships that drain rather than build. The warning is not that you'll lose your faith, it's that you'll slowly trade it for noise without realizing it. Elio once said to a friend, "I didn't stop hearing God overnight. I just started hearing everything else louder." That line echoes across generations, because that's how drift begins, not through rebellion, but through neglect. The Spirit's warning today is gentle but clear. Reclaim your focus. Every minute you give back to silence is a doorway for revelation. The noise wants to keep you blind, but stillness will make you see again. Imagine your mind as a garden. Every notification is a weed trying to choke what's growing. You don't need to fight the weeds forever, you just need to water what matters. If you tend to the right roots, the wrong ones die on their own. There's a story told among the old saints about a watchman who was assigned to guard a single flame during the long night. The flame was small, yet it lit the path for travelers in the dark. The watchman grew tired and began to stare into the shadows instead of the light. When morning came, the flame had gone out. "Why did you stop watching?" they asked. He replied, "I thought the darkness would go away on its own, but darkness never retreats until light stands firm." Chosen one, your attention is your flame. Protect it. The world will always try to pull it away through temptation, comparison, exhaustion, but your purpose cannot burn in divided light. Before you continue to the next part, I want you to write something, not for me, but as a declaration that you understand the battle that's been waging inside you. Comment. Focus. Lord, below. Why those two words? Because they're a prayer, not a slogan. They say, "I'm done letting distraction dictate my peace." When you type them, it's not about visibility, it's about accountability. It's your way of taking back what darkness tried to scatter. Let this be the moment where your mind realigns with your mission. Heaven says your focus, returning. The noise that once ruled you will soon become powerless, because awareness breaks every hidden chain. Remember, the enemy fears a focused believer more than a loud one. The loud may shout truth, but the focused one lives it. There comes a moment, quiet but heavy, when heaven's patience feels like a pause. You don't hear thunder, you don't see fire, yet something deep in your spirit knows. Mercy is speaking its final warning before it steps back. This is that moment, when mercy pauses. It's not because God has changed his love for you. It's because he refuses to let that love be taken for granted. He has whispered, tugged, reminded, comforted, and now he waits. The pause is sacred. It's where your next choice will determine what happens next. Elior learned the weight of that pause. After his season of distraction ended, he felt the quiet, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that made him question everything. For the first time in years, heaven didn't feel close. His prayers echoed back, unanswered. He wondered if he had lost something, but what he didn't realize was that heaven hadn't left him. Heaven was watching, waiting to see if he would keep walking even when he couldn't feel. That's the test every chosen one faces, the test of silence. The question is not, will you believe when you feel God? The real question is, will you still obey when you don't? Faith is not proven in fire, it's proven in the waiting room of heaven. When the light dims and the familiar presence seems far, will you stay faithful? Or will you drift back into the comfort that numbs? The writings of David capture this tension perfectly. He was a man after God's own heart. Yet he spent years running through caves and deserts, feeling forgotten. Still, he kept singing, even when the songs had no audience but heaven. That's what kept him standing, faith that worships without reward. We are reminded through the writings of David in the book of Psalms, chapter 13, verse 1. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? That cry is not rebellion, it's honesty. God can handle your questions. He can handle your tears, your frustration, your silence. What he cannot work with is apathy, the heart that stops caring, the soul that stops seeking. Sometimes the greatest act of faith is simply not giving up, to pray when nothing changes, to praise when everything hurts, to keep walking when the path seems to vanish under your feet. Mercy pauses to measure endurance. Heaven is watching how you move in the quiet. The pause is not punishment, it's preparation for promotion. You cannot hold a greater anointing if your faith only functions when life feels easy. Think of a blacksmith shaping steel. He heats it, then cools it, again and again. Each cycle strengthens what would otherwise break. That's what this silence is doing, tempering your soul for the weight of your calling. You're being forged, not forgotten. Elio came to understand this one evening as he sat watching the sunset fade. The horizon burned with light before sinking into night, and he felt God whisper, "Even the sun disappears for a season, yet the world still trusts it will rise." That was the moment he decided. Silence was not absence, it was invitation. So, if heaven feels quiet to you, don't panic. Don't assume you've been abandoned. You're being trusted with a deeper kind of walk, the kind that no longer depends on feelings, but on faith. The silence is God's classroom. It's where He tests your ability to walk by revelation, not sensation. Maybe right now, everything in your life feels paused. Doors that once opened easily are now locked. People who once stood beside you have drifted away. The joy that once came effortlessly now demands effort. Don't misinterpret it. The pause doesn't mean you're being punished. It means you're being purified. When mercy pauses, it's an act of love. It's God saying, "I believe you're ready to stand without constant reminders." The teacher doesn't talk during the test not because he's gone, but because he trusts you with what you've already learned. Let that truth sink deep. Heaven trusts you enough to be silent. You wouldn't be facing this if you weren't ready for the next level of obedience. So, stay steady. Keep praying, even when words feel dry. Keep walking, even when the road disappears. Keep trusting, even when your emotions betray you. The pause won't last forever. The God who seems silent is still speaking through circumstances, through timing. through the quiet conviction in your chest that says, "Don't give up now." Elio's silence eventually broke. One morning, the same voice that once whispered returned with fire. It said, "You endured. Now, I can build on you." And everything began to shift again. Your turn will come too. The silence won't last. It never does. But what it produces in you, strength, patience, depth, will last forever. The hidden trap of comfort rarely looks dangerous. It looks peaceful. It looks like stability. It sounds like people saying, "You've done enough," when heaven is whispering, "Not yet." Comfort doesn't come wearing chains. It comes wearing soft pillows. You've known that feeling, the slow settling of the soul, when the hunger that once drove you begins to fade. The fire that once burned fiercely becomes a quiet glow. You start telling yourself that maybe the storm is over. Maybe this is all there is. But in truth, that's when the trap begins to close. Elio walked into this trap once. After enduring seasons of silence and obedience, blessings began to pour in. His business grew. His name was respected. People came to him for advice. But gradually, he stopped asking heaven what was next. Success became his new comfort zone. And without noticing, he built a golden cage around himself. One night, as he prayed half-heartedly, he saw a vision. A bird perched inside an open cage. The door was wide open. Yet the bird didn't move. It had forgotten how to fly. Elio woke up trembling. The Lord whispered, "This is what comfort does. It makes captivity feel safe." The danger of comfort is not that it's evil, but that it dulls your edge. It teaches you to accept almost instead of complete. The moment you stop growing, you start fading. According to what is revealed in the book of Proverbs, chapter 24, verse 33, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief. That verse isn't only about money, it's about purpose. Spiritual poverty begins the same way. Little delays, small excuses, one missed prayer at a time. Comfort steals slowly. But here's the beauty: God never leaves you trapped. He sends reminders, moments like this one, to shake your spirit awake. Maybe that's why you're hearing these words right now. It's not condemnation, it's compassion. Heaven sees you resting when you should be rising. The world tells you to chase ease. Heaven tells you to chase purpose. One promises temporary peace, the other builds eternal legacy. And legacy always requires movement. You might not be asked to do something grand. Sometimes obedience looks as small as consistency, showing up, staying faithful, supporting what feeds your faith. When you invest in what strengthens you spiritually, you build altars, not monuments. Every time you you add a spark to the fire that guides another soul. When you share, it's like placing a torch in the hands of someone still wandering in darkness. When you subscribe, you're not joining a channel, you're joining a remnant that refuses to let truth die out. And if your heart feels stirred to give, to pour oil into this flame, consider donating, not as an obligation, but as an act of worship. Think of it as releasing a drop of oil into a lamp that burns through the night. Your giving becomes light for others. Your small act becomes warmth for souls you'll never meet. You are helping build a bridge of grace, stretching further than any sermon could reach. Elio once gave when he had little left, not to buy favor, but to say, "I still believe in the mission." Heaven saw it. That act broke the power of fear that whispered, "Keep it for yourself." When he released, abundance found him again. That's the secret. When you release what's in your hand, heaven releases what's in his. Comfort whispers, "Hold tighter." Faith whispers, "Let go." Oh, if this message rekindled something inside you, like this, so others can find it. Share it to pass on the flame. Subscribe if you feel called to grow within this family of faith. And if your spirit leads you to sow, give freely, without fear. You are not paying for light, you're keeping it alive. The trap of comfort breaks when you move again. Move with gratitude. Move with faith. Move with open hands. For the flame that lights your path today was once kept alive by someone else's faith yesterday. Now, you carry that torch forward. And as you keep the flame alive, heaven keeps yours burning brighter. Every act of faith you make here ripples outward, touching unseen hearts and forgotten corners of this weary world. When you give, you echo eternity. Your generosity writes stories you may never read. Yet heaven records each one in light that never fades away. You were never meant to store the light, you were meant to spread it. Keep your hands open, your spirit steady, and the fire within you will never die. There are moments when heaven speaks not through words, but through patterns, repeated numbers, unshakable coincidences, small divine signals that appear when logic runs thin. You've seen them before, a number flashing on a clock, on a receipt, on a street sign, and your heart pauses for a second as if the universe itself whispered, "Look again." Not, no. It's not superstition. It's not chance. It's the language of divine attention. Heaven reminding you that you are being guided. God often speaks in symbols to those who are sensitive enough to notice. When the physical world starts echoing spiritual truths, that's when the prophetic clock begins to tick. Elior first experienced this during one of his lowest seasons. Every morning, the same number would appear before him, on the oven timer, on phone notifications, even on random page numbers in his journal. At first, he ignored it, but the pattern persisted. Then, one night as he prayed for direction, he felt the whisper, "I am aligning you, don't miss this moment." That was when he understood that God wasn't sending numbers for fascination, but for formation. Each repetition was a rhythm of heaven, keeping him in step with divine timing. Sometimes, when the number 555 appears before those who are chosen, it's not coincidence, it's confirmation. 5 is the number of grace, but 3 5s together represent multiplied grace, a sign that heaven is shifting you into divine alignment. It's the call to move under God's timing, not your own. So if you've been seeing repeating signs, numbers, dreams, or divine coincidences, it's not random. It's heaven's way of saying, pay attention. The clock of destiny is striking. According to the sacred writings of the prophet Daniel, chapter 2, verse 22, he reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. That means God is not hiding revelation from you, he's hiding it for you, waiting until your heart is quiet enough to receive it. These numbers, these divine patterns, are not fortune-telling. They're reminders that heaven's calendar still holds your name. They are God's fingerprints on the ordinary, transforming what looks like coincidence into confirmation. You may be wondering, why me? Why now? Because heaven knows the noise around you. When words can't reach your heart, symbols slip through the cracks. When you can't hear clearly, God shows clearly. Elior began to write every time the number appeared. Over time, he saw a pattern emerge. Each moment marked by that number led to a key decision, a change, or a revelation that shaped his next season. That's when he realized the power of prophetic awareness, the ability to recognize the divine in the daily. Look around your own life. Have there been repeating signs, phrases, or numbers following you? Do they appear in moments of doubt, crossroads, or fatigue? God is trying to show you something bigger than circumstance. Heaven speaks through patterns because patterns prepare you. They keep you alert, teach you to move with divine rhythm instead of reacting to chaos. When you see 555, don't just smile. Pause, pray, and ask, what are you aligning in me? Lord, every sign is an invitation, not an obligation. Heaven never manipulates, it beckons. The numbers are not a superstition, they're a conversation. The prophet Habakkuk wrote of this very principle when he said, "Write the vision, make it plain, that those who read may run." God reveals in fragments, so your obedience can connect the dots. Each number, each repetition, is a piece of that divine map. Elior started calling these moments breadcrumbs of grace. Small, glowing reminders that heaven was never silent. Even when words seemed scarce, you too are being followed by grace, breadcrumbs, subtle, sacred signals that say, you're not lost, you're being led. End of quote. So, when you see 555, don't rush past it. Let it remind you that grace is still working, alignment is still unfolding, and destiny is still approaching. Numbers are just heaven's way of saying, you are seen. Now, if this word resonates within you, if you've been sensing signs and alignment, respond not with fear, but with faith. This is your moment of recognition, your moment to say, I understand. Lord, I see you speaking. And comment 555 below. Not as a ritual, not as superstition, but as recognition. You're saying, I acknowledge the signs. I receive the alignment. It's a small prophetic act that tells heaven you're listening. Let the number become your declaration. Every comment becomes a note in heaven's melody, a chorus of souls saying, we are awake. In heaven keeps count, not of numbers, but of hearts that respond. Your obedience, even in something as simple as this, echoes louder than you imagine. You are not waiting for a sign, you are the sign. The evidence that heaven still moves through human hearts, willing to listen. There's a heaviness that settles over the heart when warnings go unheeded. It's not immediate punishment, nor is it divine anger. It's the quiet weight of spiritual consequence. Every time heaven speaks and we hesitate, something subtle shifts within us. Conviction dulle, discernment blurs. The voice that was once clear begins to sound faint, not because God stopped speaking, but because we stopped responding. That's the hidden cost of ignoring the tug. It's like turning down the volume on truth a little more each day until silence feels normal. The greatest danger isn't rebellion, it's spiritual numbness. Elior once faced this silence again, but this time it was heavier. After seasons of grace and alignment, he began delaying small obediences. When God whispered, "Reach out to that person," he said, "Tomorrow." When prompted to pray, he said, "Later." None of it felt serious at first, but over time, later became his new language. One night, he had a dream. He was walking through a field at dusk, the sky streaked with red and gold. Ahead, he saw a lamp burning bright on a post, its glow marking the safe path home. But as he delayed, the light dimmed, then flickered out. When he reached the post, he found only ashes and the faint smell of smoke. Then came a voice, gentle but piercing. This is what delay does. When he awoke, his soul trembled. That moment changed him. He realized that every ignored nudge was a missed encounter with God. Heaven's instructions are time-sensitive. They come wrapped in moments that may not repeat. According to what is revealed in the book of James, chapter 4, verse 17, "If anyone knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them." It's a simple truth, yet it pierces deep. Sin isn't always doing wrong, it's often not doing right. The absence of obedience creates the same emptiness as rebellion. When you ignore what heaven shows you, it doesn't always bring immediate judgment, but it does bring gradual drift, like a boat that unties itself from the dock. The movement is slow, but soon the shore disappears. That's why warnings matter. They keep you anchored when the currents of comfort begin to pull. The weight of ignored warnings also shows up in small ways: loss of peace, sudden confusion, the feeling of being spiritually out of rhythm. These aren't punishments, they're reminders that something is misaligned. Heaven uses disruption to get your attention when peace can no longer hold it. Think of your spirit as a compass. Each act of obedience keeps the needle steady, pointing toward true north. Each act of delay twists it slightly off course. Ignore it long enough, and you'll find yourself walking confidently in the wrong direction. Elior's awakening was painful, but it was mercy in disguise. God allowed him to feel the distance, so he would choose closeness again. When he humbled himself and prayed, the silence broke not instantly, but steadily. The whisper returned, softer this time, but filled with grace. It was as if heaven was saying, "You finally understand what my silence meant." This is where mercy and justice meet. God's warnings aren't meant to shame you. They're meant to save you from the slow decay of disobedience. He knows how easily your heart can grow cold beneath routine, how subtly distractions become your new devotion. That's why he warns again and again, because he loves too much to let you slip quietly away. The prophet Hosea once described God's voice as a lion's roar, fierce, but not to destroy, powerful, but meant to awaken. When God warns, it's not to frighten you into obedience, but to remind you that his grace still stands open. Conviction is proof that heaven hasn't given up. If you feel the heaviness of missed chances or ignored nudges, don't drown in regret. Let it drive you back toward responsiveness. Grace is still reaching for you. The moment you say, "I hear you again," the line reconnects. The silence shatters, and light begins to flicker anew. Elior once said later in his life, "The greatest mercy is when God still bothers to warn me." He understood that conviction isn't a curse, it's a rescue. So, pause for a moment. Reflect on where you've hesitated, where you've delayed, where you've said, tomorrow. Heaven is offering you today. No, the weight you feel isn't condemnation, it's invitation. You're being called to respond quickly again, to trust immediately again, to move without delay. For every moment you respond to God's whisper, something in heaven responds to you. The lamp may have dimmed, but it's not extinguished. There is still oil left in the flame, and as long as there is oil, there is hope. You've wondered why life has never felt simple, why every season seems to test you harder than those around you. It's not that you are unlucky, it's that you are marked. Long before you were aware of your own name, heaven whispered it into existence. The battles you face are not signs of rejection, they are evidence of assignment. The chosen ones have always carried a different weight. You feel deeply, sense early, and walk roads others avoid. There's something about you that darkness recognized long before you did. That is why resistance found you so young, because purpose was already in motion. Elior remembered the first time he realized this truth. He was barely 10 years old when he felt an invisible pressure every time he tried to fit in. Friends mocked him for being too sensitive. Teachers said he overthought everything. But what no one understood was that he wasn't built to blend in. The fire inside him couldn't be smothered by normality. Years later, he would look back and see it clearly. Those who carry heaven's message often live misunderstood lives. They are shaped in solitude, refined in rejection, and taught in trials. Each wound becomes a training ground. Each disappointment becomes a divine classroom. The Word of God reveals this same pattern again and again. Moses was marked, yet raised in the house of the enemy. David was marked, yet left in the fields, while others were chosen first. Esther was marked, yet hidden, until the hour her courage was required. Marking always comes before revealing. The Apostle Paul described it beautifully. The Apostle writes in his second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 4, verse 7, "But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us." You carry treasure, but it's hidden in ordinary form. That's why your battles feel extraordinary, because the treasure you hold threatens the darkness you confront. You are not fragile because you are weak. You are fragile because what you contain is holy. Every chosen one must learn this balance. To be soft enough for God to shape and strong enough to withstand being misunderstood. The journey isn't punishment, it's preservation. Heaven protects what it values most by allowing it to be hidden until the right moment. Elior's story carried that rhythm too. When he tried to step out early, doors slammed shut. He took rejection personally, thinking God had forgotten him. But heaven was simply saying, "Not yet." The delay was protection, disguised as denial. If he had been revealed before he was ready, the weight of attention would have crushed what God was still forming. You might be in that same stage, hidden but chosen. The world doesn't see your name yet, but the spiritual realm does. The darkness already knows the potential you carry, which is why you faced unusual warfare. When ordinary people fall, it barely shakes the atmosphere, but when a chosen one rises, it sends shockwaves through unseen realms. That's why your trials are personal. They are tailor-made to silence your confidence, to make you question your identity. But identity that comes from heaven cannot be erased by earthly doubt. Think of an archer drawing back a bow. The further the string is pulled backward, the greater the distance the arrow will fly. Your backward seasons, the losses, delays, heartbreaks, were never regression. They were preparation for release. When heaven finally lets go, you will move faster and farther than those who never knew restraint. Elio came to understand that the weight he carried was not a curse, but a crown. Every sleepless night, every misunderstanding, every unseen act of faith was shaping him into someone darkness couldn't imitate. If you've ever felt like you don't belong, that's because you don't. You belong to a higher kingdom. You were never meant to fit into spaces built for comfort. You were designed for transformation, for light that disrupts darkness. The world may not applaud your quiet obedience, but heaven does. There's a ledger, unseen by human eyes, that records every yes you've whispered when no one was watching. Chosen one. The resistance you face is not random, it's recognition. The enemy attacks what he fears, and he fears the ones heaven has already anointed. You may feel small, but your obedience echoes in eternity. Elio once said, "The day I stopped asking, 'Why me?' and started saying, 'Use me,' was the day peace returned." That's the shift for every marked soul, the moment you stop fighting the mark and start walking in it. You were not overlooked, you were preserved. Not delayed. But developed. Not abandoned, but appointed. The mark of heaven is not seen in crowns, it's seen in scars that still glow with grace. There comes a point in every journey when recognition is no longer enough, response must follow. Heaven's whispers mean nothing if they do not move your feet. The time for waiting has passed. This is the hour for action. You felt the call pressing on your spirit. The same dream keeps returning. The same verse keeps replaying in your heart. The same nudge keeps interrupting your comfort. That's not repetition. That's divine insistence. Heaven will repeat what you ignore until obedience becomes your only peace. Elio knew that feeling well. After realizing he was marked, he began to sense an urgency. God was no longer speaking in long sentences, just single, sharp impressions. Now, go, speak. Every time he delayed, the unease returned, until finally, he understood that faith doesn't live in thoughts, it lives in motion. There's a danger in spiritual hesitation. When God says, "Move," and you wait, the moment can close like a door. Grace operates in timing, and timing is heaven's currency. What you do now will echo in seasons you haven't reached yet. Scripture shows this truth through Joshua's story. The people of Israel stood before the flooded Jordan, terrified to cross. But God didn't dry the river before they stepped in. He waited until their feet touched the water. Only then did the miracle begin. The power was released not by prayer alone, but by motion. Heaven speaks through that same pattern even now. According to what is written in the book of Joshua, chapter 3, verse 13, when the priests step in, carrying the ark of God, the Jordan's waters will part and stand up in a heap. Notice the phrase, as soon as, not before, not after, but in the moment of obedience. That's where divine intervention meets human faith. Elio's obedience was small at first. He reached out to the person he'd been avoiding. He spoke words of encouragement when fear told him to stay quiet. Each act unlocked something invisible. Doors began to open. Peace returned. His courage grew. Heaven doesn't require perfection. It requires participation. Maybe that's where you are now. You've received enough confirmations to know the next step. But fear still whispers. What if it fails? Yet what if it doesn't? What if your obedience is the key someone else is praying for? Heaven doesn't measure greatness by results, but by response. The prophets who changed history weren't the loudest. They were simply the ones who said yes first. There's a holy momentum that comes when obedience aligns with destiny. You'll feel it like wind rushing behind you, carrying your steps further than your strength could ever take you. That's not adrenaline, it's anointing. But here's the truth. Obedience will cost you. It will ask for your comfort, your reputation, sometimes even your security. Yet everything you surrender becomes seed for something greater. God never asks without intending to multiply. Elia once wrote in his journal, "I learned that obedience feels risky only until you remember who's commanding." Those words became his anchor. Every time fear tried to drag him back, he'd remind himself that risk inside God's will is safer than certainty outside it. Your life is standing in that same space, the Jordan moment. The river looks impossible, but heaven is waiting for your first step. Do not underestimate small beginnings. Every great move of God started with one person who said, "I'll go first." The silence of waiting will end the moment you act. Heaven's power flows toward movement, not hesitation. Faith is not the absence of fear, it's the refusal to bow to it. Now, it's your turn to respond. Not tomorrow, not later. Now, comment, "I will move." These three words are more than a statement, they're a covenant. They mean, I will no longer delay my obedience. When you type them, you're stepping into the river before it parts. You're declaring that you trust the unseen hand guiding your next step. Heaven doesn't need your perfection. It desires your permission. The moment you say, "I will move," angels begin to clear the path before you. You've waited long enough. The water is rising. The call is clear. It's time to step in. When you write those words, it's not a performance, it's prophecy. Heaven doesn't respond to noise. It responds to faith. Each letter you type becomes a spiritual footprint, proof that you are walking toward obedience, not away from it. The phrase, "I will move," is a declaration of surrender. It tells heaven you are ready to trade hesitation for destiny. It's not a comment, it's your covenant. No weapon formed against you can prosper, but that doesn't mean the weapons won't form. It means they will fail to finish what they started. You've been feeling the resistance, the subtle waves of exhaustion, the voices telling you you're alone. But you're not abandoned, you're protected. The presence of opposition isn't proof of God's absence. It's proof that you're advancing. When light moves forward, darkness always pushes back. Yet light doesn't fight. It simply shines until the shadows dissolve. Elia discovered this truth during his hardest season. A group of people he trusted began to turn on him. Rumor spread. Support vanished. He couldn't understand why those he helped most were now silent. He wanted to fight back, to defend himself, but the Spirit whispered, "Don't answer the darkness, outshine it." And that became his turning point. Instead of wasting strength on battles beneath his purpose, he poured it into what God was building. Soon, peace returned, first quietly, then completely. He learned that silence is not weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. Heaven doesn't always fight loud, it fights long. We find this same strength echoed through the prophet Isaiah's ancient words. The prophet wrote in the book of Isaiah, chapter 54, verse 17, "No weapon formed against you will ever prevail. You will silence every tongue. This is the Lord's heritage." You carry that heritage. That promise isn't only protection from harm, it's authority over fear. You are covered not because you're perfect, but because you're positioned. The battle that was meant to destroy you will end up defining you. Elia once said, "The moment I stopped fearing arrows, I realized I was meant to wear armor." That's the revelation for every chosen one. You were never meant to hide, you were meant to stand. Sometimes God lets the storm rage, so you can discover the anchor He already placed within you. Strength is not built in comfort, it's forged in chaos. Like a tree growing stronger against the wind, you are developing roots that storms cannot uproot. The world may not understand how you keep standing. They'll think you're lucky. But luck has nothing to do with it. It's grace wrapped in endurance. And now, let's talk about endurance in another form, the endurance of faith through generosity, kindness, and support. When we give, when we lift others, we reinforce heaven's system of light. Every time you breathe air into a fading ember. When you share, you're scattering sparks across the dark fields of the internet. When you subscribe, you're not joining a channel, you're planting your torch among a growing constellation of faith. And if your heart feels moved to pour back into this mission, to help this stream of messages reach further, to touch lives that still wander in silence, consider giving, not as an obligation, not because it's required, but as a sacred echo of gratitude, an act that waters the roots of a garden of light. Imagine your generosity as rainfall over dry soil. Every drop you give seeps deep, awakening seeds that will bloom into hope for someone else. Some flowers you'll see, most you won't. Yet heaven will. It's like tending a vineyard planted by unseen hands. Your giving becomes sunlight to fruit you may never taste, but its sweetness will heal another soul. When Elia began giving, he realized that generosity isn't losing, it's letting God multiply what would have stayed still. Your open hand keeps the river of grace flowing. Your kindness keeps this current alive. So if this message stirred something within you, choose freely to like it, to share it, to subscribe. Let each action be a gentle way of saying, "I want the light to travel further." And if your spirit nudges you to give, release what you can, in your own rhythm, as worship, not obligation. Heaven never counts amounts, it counts hearts that stay open. Because this isn't about sustaining words, it's about sustaining hope. Hope is like a lantern hung in the distance. Each contribution adds a new flame. Each share extends its glow across another valley. You are not funding content, you are feeding souls. You're choosing to be part of a quiet army that fights darkness by keeping lamps lit. And when heaven looks down and sees all those small lights flickering together, it smiles because the night never wins when the faithful keep shining. And somewhere, someone sitting in silence will see the light you helped keep burning and realize they were never forgotten. That's the miracle hidden in generosity. It travels further than you ever could. You are not just sustaining a message, you are sustaining movement. Hope lives because you chose to keep it alive. There is a quiet separation taking place across the earth, unseen by most, but felt by every awakened soul. It isn't a physical divide, it's spiritual. God is drawing a line, not of punishment, but of purpose. Those who have merely heard the call will remain where they are. But those who have obeyed the call are being set apart for something greater. You can feel it, can't you? That invisible shift in the atmosphere, that sense that things that once fit no longer do. Conversations that used to flow now feel heavy. Rooms that once welcomed you now feel dim. It's not rejection, it's redirection. Heaven is repositioning you. Elior felt this shift too. He noticed it first in his relationships. People he once leaned on began to fade from his circle. He tried to hold on, afraid of being alone. But no matter how tightly he grasped, they slipped away. One night, exhausted from trying to fix what was no longer meant to be, he heard the Spirit whisper, "I am not removing them to hurt you, I'm removing them to make room." Oh, separation often feels like loss, but it's actually refinement. You can't step into divine purpose carrying every voice from your past. Some people were chapters, not the whole book. Some were assignments, not alliances. Heaven prunes what hinders growth. And pruning always feels like breaking until fruit appears. It's the same truth Jesus shared with his disciples when he said that every branch that bears fruit must be pruned so it can bear more. Growth requires cutting. Maturity requires letting go. The Apostle Paul captured this spiritual divide when he wrote to the believers in Corinth. The Apostle writes in his second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 6, verse 17, "Therefore come out from among them and be separate, says the Lord. Touch no unclean thing, and I will receive you." It's not a call to isolation, it's a call to elevation. God doesn't separate to leave you lonely, He separates to make you ready. The higher the purpose, the fewer the companions. When Elior finally surrendered to the separation, peace returned. He realized that solitude was not punishment. It was the space where heaven speaks clearest. In the noise of constant company, God's voice is easily drowned out. But in stillness, clarity becomes sharp. Conviction becomes bold. The hour of separation is also the hour of unveiling. God is not only removing, He is revealing. As some doors close, others quietly open. You begin to meet people who speak the same language of faith, who carry light that matches your own. Alignment replaces attachment. Destiny begins to find its true tribe. Sometimes, the Lord hides you to heal you. Other times, He hides you to prepare you for visibility that your current circle cannot handle. Don't mourn what you lost. Honor what it taught you. Even betrayals have their purpose. They push you into the arms of God, where dependence replaces disappointment. Think of gold in the furnace. It cannot be purified in a crowd. It must stand alone in fire. Separation burns, but it also beautifies. Every time you let go of what no longer serves your spirit, you become lighter, clearer, stronger. Elior wrote in his journal during that time, "What I thought was isolation was actually consecration." God wasn't subtracting people, He was multiplying focus. Those words became his anchor. Maybe you're walking through a similar season right now where familiar voices grow faint and the old rhythm no longer works. Don't rush to fill the silence. Stay. Let the pruning finish. You'll soon see that what God took away couldn't have gone where He's leading you. Separation precedes revelation. Before God shows you what's next, He clears what's no longer necessary. It's mercy, not rejection. So, as the old falls away, lift your eyes. You're not losing ground, you're being lifted to higher terrain. The horizon is widening. The fog is thinning. You're not being left behind, you're being set apart. And one day soon, you'll understand why the removal had to happen. You'll look back and realize that the emptiness you feared was actually the womb of destiny, carrying the birth of your next season. When separation feels painful, remember it's heaven's surgery, not punishment. God cuts only what threatens to corrupt your purpose. The ache you feel today is proof that transformation is working beneath the surface, crafting strength where dependence once lived. In silence, God shapes the unshakable. What leaves creates space for what lasts. Stay still. Glory is forming. Every ending is really a disguised beginning. When one season folds into another, heaven often sends a sign not to frighten you, but to prepare you for the transition. What feels like loss is not always punishment. Sometimes it's promotion wearing the mask of pain. There are moments when the door closes so quietly you don't even realize it's shut. And yet, somehow, deep within, your spirit knows something has ended. The friendships fade. The opportunities dry up. The familiar patterns stop working. You wonder, did I do something wrong? But the truth is, heaven simply shifted the scenery. The play isn't over. Only the stage has changed. Elio came to understand this one winter night when everything seemed to collapse at once. His work failed. His closest friend left. And even his prayers felt unanswered. He sat in the dark for hours, asking, "Lord, what are you doing?" Then, softly, he heard, "I am ending what you would not." And the words broke him and freed him. That night, he realized that the same God who opens doors also closes them when they no longer lead to destiny. He began to see endings not as rejection, but as redirection. It is written in the book of Romans, chapter 8, verse 28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Even in endings, God is weaving good. What feels like destruction is often divine construction happening behind the scenes. Endings hurt because they expose how attached we've become to seasons that were only meant to be temporary. You can't cling to the ashes and expect new fire to burn. Every chapter must end for the story to progress. The prophetic number that marks this kind of divine closure and rebirth is 888, the number of new beginnings through resurrection. If 777 symbolized divine completion and 555 represented alignment, then 888 declares renewal. It means God has closed one cycle and is breathing life into another. Elior began noticing this number everywhere after that winter. Receipts, pages, even street signs, it kept appearing. At first, he thought it was coincidence, until one morning during prayer, he felt the Spirit whisper, "What ended was never loss, it was room being made for resurrection." End of that morning, Elio wrote a phrase that would define his next season: "Heaven never subtracts without multiplying later." End of. Maybe you've been standing in the ashes, staring at doors that won't open again. You keep trying keys that no longer fit, replaying moments that no longer exist. Heaven is saying, "Stop mourning what I've already moved from." You're not being punished, you're being prepared. Every divine ending carries two invitations: grief and gratitude. Grief for what is gone, and gratitude for what's coming. When you hold both, you grow. Think of a seed breaking in the ground. It looks like death from the outside, but within, life is forming. The shell must crack for growth to emerge. The breaking is not destruction, it's transition. God doesn't recycle old seasons, He resurrects new ones. That's what 888 means, the breath of new beginnings. The restoration of what was once lost, but returned in a greater form. Eliah's new beginning didn't look spectacular at first. It came in quiet moments of peace, in small signs of restoration. A new opportunity arrived. Relationships healed. Clarity returned. The pain that once haunted him became fuel for wisdom. You might be standing in your own in-between right now, half grieving, half hoping. Don't rush the process. Endings are heaven's gentle way of saying, rest before the rebirth. There's a rhythm to God's timing. He ends. He empties. Then He fills again. If you skip the emptying, you can't hold the new. So, pause here. Let your heart breathe. The weight of what's gone is making space for what's on the way. Comment 888 below. When you do, let it not be superstition, but a declaration. I welcome new beginnings. It's not about numbers, it's about acknowledgement. You're marking a moment of surrender, telling heaven you're ready for what's next. Eliah once said that every prophetic act on earth creates a ripple in heaven. So when you type those digits, see them not as a code, but as a covenant, a symbol that you trust God's timing over your timeline. You've cried enough over what's ended. Now, let hope have the final word. The God who closed one chapter is already writing the next. And the ink of grace has never run dry. The ending is not the edge, it's the entrance. The number 888 is heaven's reminder that resurrection doesn't just happen once. It happens every time you let go and begin again. Lift your eyes. Chosen one. You are not standing in the ruins, you're standing on the threshold. There comes a time when you can no longer run from the mirror, not the kind that reflects your face, but the kind that reveals your soul. The mirror of accountability is not made of glass, it's made of truth. It doesn't show you how others see you, it shows you how heaven sees you. When Eliah entered this season, he thought he was ready. After enduring silence, separation, and renewal, he felt stronger than ever. But God wasn't finished. The next lesson wouldn't come through storms or warfare, it would come through reflection. One morning, as he prayed, Eliah felt the Spirit whisper, "You've faced your enemies. Now, face yourself." The words pierced him more deeply than any trial. It's easier to fight visible battles than to confront invisible ones. Every chosen one reaches this moment, the inner reckoning. It's the season where God holds up a mirror, not to condemn, but to cleanse. He begins showing you not what's wrong with the world, but what still lingers within you. Pride dressed as confidence, fear disguised as caution, doubt hiding behind logic. It's uncomfortable to look, but transformation cannot come without truth. Conviction is heaven's scalpel. It cuts only to heal. The Apostle James wrote about this very mirror in his letter to believers. The Apostle wrote in the book of James, chapter 1, verse 23, "Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and, after looking at himself, goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like." The mirror of the word doesn't lie. It shows the wrinkles of compromise, the stains of silence, the scars of stubbornness. But it also reflects grace, grace that says, "Now that you see it, let me heal it." Elia's mirror moment came when he realized how much of his obedience had been fueled by fear of failure rather than love for God. He had been moving, yes, but from anxiety, not intimacy. The Spirit showed him that true obedience doesn't come from pressure, it comes from presence. That revelation broke something open inside him. He stopped striving and started surrendering. He learned that confession is not weakness, it's invitation. Every time he admitted his flaws, heaven responded with fresh strength. We live in a world that teaches us to perform, to polish, to hide our cracks. But God works differently. He doesn't demand perfection, He desires purity. Purity isn't about being spotless, it's about being honest. The moment you stop pretending is the moment healing begins. You may think you've failed too often, that your reflection is beyond repair. But grace is a master artist. It turns cracks into designs, flaws into features, like stained glass. Your broken pieces can still catch the light. When you stand before heaven's mirror, you'll see what Elia saw, not a condemned soul, but a crafted one. The edges of your failures frame the beauty of your redemption. Think of gold again, refined by fire. The refiner doesn't throw away the metal when it melts. He watches closely, removing the impurities as they rise to the surface. Your current season may feel hot, but it's not punishment, it's purification. God is removing what dulls your reflection. So, when people look at you, they no longer see the past, they see His presence. Elia's transformation became visible, not because he shouted louder, but because he shone Kita. His peace returned, his words softened, his purpose sharpened. He wrote in his journal, "Holiness isn't what I wear, it's what I dare to admit." That's the secret of accountability. It doesn't chain you, it frees you. Every truth faced becomes a key that unlocks new grace. Every confession builds courage for the next calling. So if heaven is showing you parts of yourself you'd rather ignore, don't run. Look, the pain of recognition is far lighter than the cost of denial. Accountability doesn't expose you to shame, it exposes you to transformation. The Spirit's conviction isn't the end of grace, it's the proof that grace is still reaching for you. When Elior looked in that mirror for the last time in that season, he wept, not out of guilt, but gratitude, because, for the first time, he saw himself as heaven did, imperfect, but redeemable, wounded, but usable. And when you reach that same point, you'll understand this truth too. The mirror doesn't just reflect who you are, it reveals who you're becoming. When you finally face that reflection, shame dissolves and strength takes its place. The mirror no longer condemns you, it commissions you to walk forward carrying the light of your redeemed truth. Every time light expands, shadow resists. It has always been that way. You can't carry divine fire without drawing the attention of darkness. The clash of light and shadow is not a punishment. It's proof that your presence disrupts something unseen. Elior entered this stage right after his mirror season. Peace had settled in. Clarity returned. And then warfare began again. Not the external kind, this time, but the inner kind. Doubt, fear, and discouragement crept in from nowhere. He thought he was moving backward, but heaven was simply strengthening his foundation through resistance. Every chosen one experiences this cycle: revelation, rest, and then resistance. It's the rhythm of growth. Darkness doesn't attack empty vessels. It aims at those carrying oil. If you're being pressed, it's because something sacred is flowing from you. At first, Elior tried to fight everything that moved people, circumstances, even himself. But the Spirit whispered, "This isn't a battle of fists. It's a battle of focus." The enemy's goal isn't always to destroy you. Sometimes it's to distract you. If he can't stop your calling, he'll try to steal your clarity. He'll throw confusion in your path, exhaustion in your soul, and frustration in your heart. You'll begin to question whether your progress was even real. That's when you must remember, peace is not the absence of war, it's the awareness of who stands beside you in it. The Apostle Paul wrote about this invisible struggle centuries ago, describing the very tension you now feel. The Apostle wrote in his letter to the Ephesians, chapter 6, verse 12, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." End quote. Your enemy is not the person who misunderstands you. It's not the obstacle in front of you. It's the spirit behind confusion that wants to dim your light. Elior learned to stop wasting energy fighting the wrong battles. Instead, he began to guard his atmosphere, protecting his mind like a fortress and his heart like a flame. He realized that spiritual warfare isn't about fighting harder, it's about standing firmer. He once wrote, "The enemy's greatest weapon is noise, but heaven speaks in stillness. That's why rest is not retreat, it's resistance." Every time you choose calm over chaos, you're declaring victory in a language darkness cannot understand. There's an art to holding your ground when the shadows close in. You don't have to match the darkness, you only have to maintain your light. Fire doesn't chase the night, it simply burns until the night runs out of fuel. Think of a lighthouse during a storm. It doesn't run down to the shore to fight the waves. It stands tall, steady, shining from its place. You, too, are called to stand immovable, radiant, unwavering. Elior faced waves of doubt that tried to extinguish his peace. He woke one night feeling an unshakable fear pressing on his chest. Instead of panicking, he whispered, "I'm still standing." The pressure lifted instantly. That was when he understood. Sometimes the battle isn't to make the storm stop, but to prove you can still worship in the rain. Light doesn't need to shout to win, it only needs to keep shining. The sound of steady faith terrifies the darkness more than any noise of panic. You might be feeling that same clash right now, the tension between clarity and confusion, between peace and pressure. Don't assume you're losing. The very fact that you can feel the battle means your spirit is alive. The dead don't fight. The chosen do. Every wave that hits you is proof that you're still sailing. Every shadow that falls over you confirms that you're still carrying light. The greater the resistance, the greater the revelation it precedes. Elior's life changed when he stopped praying, "Lord, remove the darkness," and started praying, "Lord, strengthen my light." That's when the war shifted. The shadows didn't disappear, but they lost their authority. There's a certain calm that comes to those who understand their position. You're not fighting for victory, you're standing in it. The cross settled that battle long before your storm began. When you grasp that truth, fear becomes an echo instead of a threat. Anxiety becomes a signal instead of a sentence. The clash becomes choreography, each movement turning chaos into the rhythm of purpose. So when the darkness presses close, don't panic. Remember who you are. Remember what you carry. You are the light that darkness cannot comprehend. Elior ended that season with this realization written in his final journal entry: the war never ends, but neither does grace. And grace keeps winning. There comes a moment when destiny stops whispering and begins to call by name. It's not the shout of thunder, it's the soft but undeniable pull that says, it's time. The time to choose your crown. Not as an ornament of pride, but as a symbol of surrender. Elior reached this moment at dawn, after years of tests, silence, and refining. He stood on a hill watching the sunrise. The light crept over the horizon, spilling gold across the valley, and he heard the Spirit speak. Now, wear what you've been carrying. He understood instantly. Crowns aren't given in comfort, they're forged in fire. You, too, have walked through fire. Every tear, every loss, every prayer uttered in exhaustion was shaping you for this very moment. Crowns aren't for the perfect, they're for the persistent. Heaven doesn't crown talent, it crowns endurance. The Apostle wrote in his second letter to Timothy, chapter 4, verse 8, "There is a crown awaiting me, the crown of righteousness, which the Lord will give to all who love his appearing." This crown is not a decoration, it's identity restored. It's heaven saying, you finished what fear tried to stop. And Elior fell to his knees as the sun broke fully over the ridge. He realized the crown he was meant to wear was invisible to the world, but radiant to heaven. It wasn't gold, it was obedience. Crowns come to those who keep choosing faith, even when results hide. And this is where your story meets his. Heaven is asking for your choice, not your perfection, not your performance. Just your willingness to say, I choose my crown. Nah, but this choice isn't only a word, it's a posture. To choose your crown is to walk in humility, to carry light when others drop their lamps, to love when bitterness feels easier. Every small act of grace you show, every time you forgive when you could resent, every moment you give when you could withhold, you are polishing your crown with eternity's cloth. That's the beautiful mystery of faith. Crowns are built from moments no one sees. Every time you lift your torch a little higher. When you share, you scatter sparks across valleys that forgot the sun. When you comment, your words become lanterns hung on someone else's path. If this message finds you in a sacred pause, let your heart answer naturally. Comment the words, I choose my crown. You're not just writing, you're engraving your surrender onto the timeline of heaven. And if your spirit stirs to give, see it not as donation, but devotion. Imagine pouring golden oil into a lamp that keeps generations warm. Each drop becomes light for a traveler you may never meet. When you subscribe, picture yourself joining a constellation, a network of lamps suspended over the world, each one echoing another's glow. You are part of a living map that guides the weary home. Elior once said, when we give, we don't lose fire, we multiply sunrise. That is the essence of generosity. Your open hand builds bridges of flame across darkness, connecting hearts that thought they were alone. So, if this message awakened something in you, like, share, speak, give, or simply listen, whichever your heart chooses. Every gentle act becomes a stone in the cathedral of hope we are building together. You are not funding words, you are watering wonder. You are not maintaining a page, you are tending a field where faith can bloom again. And one day, when heaven opens the great scroll of memory, your name will glow beside every spark you helped keep alive. And somewhere in the distance, another heart will feel warmth it cannot explain. That warmth will be your echo, the light of your obedience traveling beyond sight, past algorithms, into eternity's current. Heaven always remembers who kept the lamps burning when the night was longest. Your faith, your generosity, your gentle, yes, all of it is recorded in light. So keep shining, quietly and faithfully. The fire you guard today will become tomorrow's sunrise for someone else. Every flame you share becomes a doorway through which another soul finds home. When you finally see how far your light has traveled, you'll realize you were never just part of a message, you were part of a movement heaven began through you. That's the quiet majesty of obedience. It ripples through eternity. Keep tending the flame within. Let love remain your language, grace your rhythm, and surrender your crown's true shine. Somewhere beyond the noise, a remnant is rising. You can't always see them, but you can feel their presence, souls that refuse to bow to fear, hearts that burn quietly with holy defiance. They are the ones heaven has been preparing in secret, polishing in silence, refining through resistance. You are one of them. The world won't announce their arrival. There will be no headlines or applause. The rise of the crowned remnant doesn't begin with spectacle, it begins with surrender. They are not climbing ladders of fame, they are kneeling on floors of prayer. Their crowns don't glitter, they glow. Elior saw this unfolding during a dream that felt too real to ignore. He stood in a vast field at night. Across the horizon, hundreds of small flames flickered in the distance. They weren't torches or candles, they were people. Each carried light within, not around them. As the wind blew harder, some flames vanished, but others grew stronger, brighter, steadier. The more the darkness pressed, the more radiant the remnant became. When Elior asked in the dream, "Who are they?" the voice answered, "They are the ones who listened when others scrolled away." End of 2. He woke in tears, realizing that what he saw wasn't fantasy, it was prophecy. The crowned ones were rising quietly all over the world, not through noise, but through obedience. Their strength was invisible, their authority unspoken, their impact eternal. The prophet Haggai once recorded the same stirring call in a moment when the people had grown weary of rebuilding. The prophet wrote in the book of Haggai, chapter 2, verse 4, "Be strong, all you people, and continue the work, for I am with you, declares the Lord of hosts." Those words ring true for every generation of the faithful. The remnant doesn't rise because circumstances are easy, they rise because God is with them. Every generation has had its remnant. Noah building while mocked, Daniel praying while condemned, Mary believing while misunderstood. These were not the loudest voices, but they were the lasting ones. Heaven always hides its greatest strength in humility. You've probably felt that pull yourself, the quiet, knowing that you were never meant to blend in, that something in you burns differently. You faced unusual resistance, endured storms that others couldn't understand, and wondered why your path seems narrower. That's because your calling requires clarity that cannot coexist with crowd noise. Being part of the remnant isn't about superiority, it's about responsibility. God trusts you with what others overlook. The fire inside you isn't for comfort, it's for confrontation with lies, with despair, with apathy. The crowned remnant walks into broken places, carrying the same light that once healed them. Eliah's own fire was tested one last time when tragedy struck his village. A sudden storm destroyed homes and swept away what little the people had built. Panic spread quickly. But Eliah remembered the dream. He gathered the few who still believed and said, "We are the light. We don't wait for rescue. We become it." That they began rebuilding. Not just structures, but faith. Families who had lost everything started singing again. Children who feared the night began laughing under candlelight. It wasn't easy, but slowly, beauty returned to the ruins. That's what the remnant does. They rebuild where others run. You don't need a stage to be part of this movement. The remnant rises in ordinary spaces, in homes, workplaces, small circles of prayer, even in quiet hearts that choose compassion over comfort. You are part of that divine network. Your consistency is a weapon, your kindness, our rebellion against darkness. Sometimes you'll feel unseen, but the unseen are the ones shaping tomorrow. Eliah's dream became a reality not because he sought attention, but because he carried endurance. When the crowd scattered, he stayed. That's what sets the remnant apart. They don't quit when the fire tests them. They become the fire. There's a sacred steadiness that comes when you realize you are not alone in your stand. Across oceans and time zones, heaven's remnant is awakening builders, dreamers, worshippers, warriors, each carrying a fragment of divine purpose. The crowned ones rise not by might, but by mercy. They are gentle, yet unbreakable, humble, yet unstoppable. When they speak, darkness trembles. When they love, weil's fall. Eliah wrote in his final note, "The remnant is not coming, they're already here. You are reading this because you are one of them." The world may not see the coronation, but heaven does. Each act of quiet obedience places another jewel in your unseen crown. And though the night may still be long, the remnant stands ready, glowing, steady, eternal. Dawn has always been the quietest hour before everything changes. The sky shifts from black to gray, and for a moment, it's hard to tell if light is winning or simply waiting. That in-between moment when the horizon holds its breath is where destiny usually happens. Eliah stood there once more, on the same hill where his journey began. The years had carved their lines on his face, yet peace had replaced the tension in his eyes. The valley below was alive again, fields blooming, rivers moving, laughter echoing where lament once lived. What was once ruin had become restoration. He knew that the battles had not been wasted. Every tear, every wound, every unanswered prayer had been an ingredient in something sacred. God hadn't taken him around the storm. He had taught him how to walk through it and remain unbroken. Eliah thought of the days when silence felt like punishment, when separation felt like abandonment, and when obedience felt like emptiness. He smiled now. realizing those were the very seasons that had built the endurance he was standing on. Grace had been the architect all along. There are seasons when heaven doesn't send miracles in flashes of power, but in the slow, steady forming of character. Miracles of becoming are quieter, but they last longer. He whispered softly into the wind. Now I see why the fire never left. It wasn't burning me. It was building me. Somewhere behind him, a small child ran past, chasing a piece of cloth fluttering like a banner. The laughter carried across the field, and Elia closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he didn't pray for anything. He simply thanked. He realized that purpose doesn't always look like conquest. Sometimes it looks like contentment, the quiet, knowing that you've done what you were born to do. And it was enough. The sound of wings brushed the air above him. Looking up, he saw a flock of birds rising, gliding effortlessly toward the dawn. They didn't flap frantically, they trusted the wind. And in that moment, he understood. That's how grace carries the chosen ones. They don't strive, they surrender to the current that knows the way. You've walked a similar road, through confusion and calling, through resistance and revelation. You've questioned, cried, risen, fallen, and risen again. Yet here you are still standing, still believing, still burning. That persistence is proof of divine design. The story of the chosen has never been about escaping struggle. It's about enduring transformation. The fire that once terrified you became the same fire that forged your faith. The silence that once frightened you became the soil where your discernment grew. The waiting that once felt wasted became the womb of your wisdom. Elia knew his task was done. The field before him was no longer his battlefield, it was his legacy. Others would now walk these same paths, guided by the same unseen hand. He didn't need recognition. He only wanted reflection that somewhere, someone would see light in their own valley and remember his story. He bent down, picked up a smooth stone from the ground, and placed it on the old altar he had built years ago. Time had worn it down, but its foundation remained. He whispered, "For every chosen one still walking, may their fire never fade." Then he turned toward the sunrise. As the first rays touched his face, it felt like heaven breathing on him again. Everything that once felt uncertain now seemed perfectly timed. The long nights, the breaking, the rebuilding, it all led here. The journey wasn't about reaching a destination, it was about becoming someone who could carry divine light without dropping it. And as the world around him brightened, Elior finally rested in the truth. Chosen ones don't chase crowns, they become them. He walked down the hill slowly, leaving footprints glowing faintly where he stepped, as if the earth itself recognized the weight of fulfillment. Behind him, the wind whispered the same message it had spoken to countless others before. It is finished. But it will never end. Because every chosen one becomes a spark for the next, and every ending is just heaven turning the page. Elior disappeared into the morning light, not as a hero, but as harmony, a note that had finally found its chord. The air around him shimmered as if heaven itself sighed in relief, whispering, "This is what faith looks like when it finishes well." And long after his footsteps faded, the hill remained a silent witness to what obedience can build. Seeds he never saw would soon rise in the same soil, carrying his fire, his faith, his fragrance of surrender. The story would live on because light, once born, never dies. You've reached the end of this journey, but heaven calls it a beginning. What you've just heard isn't a story, it's a summons, a reminder that you were never ordinary, never random, never forgotten. You were chosen to carry light where others see only dusk. Elia's path mirrors yours, seasons of silence, refining, and revelation that led to purpose. His story closes here, but yours continues beyond this page. The flame has passed to you now. What will you do with it? If these words stirred something within you, respond in your own way, not out of duty, but out of devotion. When you like, you breathe life into the flame, giving it air to rise higher. When you share, you release that same flame into unseen valleys, where another heart waits for warmth. When you comment, your words become petals scattered into the garden of souls, seeds of courage waiting to bloom. And if your spirit feels led to go further, let generosity become your final act of worship. See every gift not as departure, but as planting. Picture your kindness falling into the soil of heaven's harvest, where it grows into unseen miracles. Every offering becomes a spark, reborn as sunlight for someone still lost in night. When you subscribe, imagine joining hands with a constellation of steady lights, each one beating like a heart across the horizon. Together, we form the map of hope heaven draws for the world. You're not maintaining content, you're maintaining connection. You're not funding words, you're watering wonder. Each small act keeps the flame alive, stretching beyond walls and screens, weaving light through generations unseen. And somewhere, beyond this moment, heaven looks down, smiling softly, whispering what Elia once heard at dawn: "Well done, light bearer. Keep shining." Oh,